Hey everybody, this is Micah Parsons Akoye.
We're 2 games into the season and Micah Parsons is no longer a Dallas Cowboy. Let that sink in. The face of this defense, the guy who's supposed to be this era's Lawrence Taylor, is gone. Traded. I know how it feels. The last time the Dallas Cowboys made a move like this, it was Herschel Walker. And the deal birthed a dynasty. So now we've got to ask, is Micah Parsons the missing piece for someone else's rings or the sacrificial piece that Jerry Jones needed to build the future? Both could be true, but let's find out. Welcome to Micah Parsons, his accumulation of knowledge over his years of experience. Let's walk through it. Why trade him now, though? Was it the salary cap crossroads? I mean, we can go back and look at Dak's extension, and he didn't have to fight too much, although he had to fight. But he just got extended not too long ago, and Dak Prescott seems to be happy and walking into that leadership role, doing some of the things that Jerry kind of speaks to, whereas he has, I think, half a football field, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen it, but I think he has half a football field in his backyard where he regularly trains and works with a lot of the receivers that are on this team. And he looks at that as a way of not only providing leadership, but also some sort of ROI for Jerry's money, meaning players are leaning into Dak Prescott in order to get better and get on the same page with the leader of this team, Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb got a payday as well. You can see that CeeDee Lamb has stepped into a more leadership position where he's trying to school and mentor guys. And I don't want to say mentors if they're, young pups and he's the OG or something like that. I'm just saying you can see him working with GP, George Pickens. You can see him working with the other receivers in the room, in that receiver room, trying to make sure they're all on the same page. After dropping several passes in the opener, CeeDee Lamb was seen stand behind and catching balls from the jug machine, just trying to lead by example. And leadership will become an overarching theme that may lead to some of the answers that we're asking in regards to why Micah Parsons may be gone. They may be true, may not. We don't know for sure, but we definitely gonna find out. We're gonna get as close to the answers from the outside looking in approach that we can get in this film and in this video. Okay, but there's O-line needs as well. We got guys like Tyler Smith that are going to need to be paid soon. We saw that right after the trade, Bland got paid. Bland's in a boot right now, but he got paid, So there are players that are here because Micah Parsons is not. And there are going to be players that are here in the future because Micah Parsons is not. So those things have to be weighed when you talk about why you trade a generational talent like Micah Parsons. Okay. Parsons wasn't waiting. He wasn't willing to wait. Green Bay gave him 4 years and $188 million. $136 million of that is guaranteed, and $47 million a year is what he's going to be given. That is QB money. That's substantially more than what we were trying to pay Dak Prescott in his initial contract. Okay. So to say that there's a non-QB in the league that's being paid this much, it doesn't come with just sacks and stats. Leadership and locker room dynamics and playoff performance has to factor into that conversation. Now, how well does that factor into the conversation when you're talking about Micah Parsons and his tenure here with the Dallas Cowboys? Okay, we all know about the Green Bay game, and he's actually on Green Bay, which is that's what makes a lot of fans sick, to be honest. But we all know about that game where really it looked like the game plan was just to run at Micah Parsons and, run at those edges and hope that you catch him going upfield trying to get to the QB, right? We've seen games like the Buffalo game where Josh Allen really didn't throw the ball very much. I think he dropped back maybe 15 times. They just ran the ball at the Dallas Cowboys. And with running and stopping the run being the integral parts of historically good football, when you can't do that, you have a generational talent on the team, and you can't stop the run with that individual, well, you got to ask yourself, how good can we be if you're Jerry anyway, if I pay Micah Parsons this money? Jerry Jones has an oil mindset, which means he likes to flip assets at their peak. Anyone who's seen the Netflix documentary, which is great, by the way, if you haven't, go out and watch it. But you can see where Jerry Jones, made his name. He will reinvest that type of money into multiple wells and try to strike again. That's just what he does. And he was a gambler because he had a lot of debt, right? But sometimes trading a star based on Jerry's mindset is about cap structure just as much as it is about talent. The question you have to ask, though, is, was this solely about money? Is Jerry just being tight with the purse strings? Or is it about locker room dynamics? Were there players who came out like Malik Hooker and DeMarcus Lawrence who had issues with Parsons? Of course. But were those issues big enough to destroy the nucleus of what we were trying to build here culturally? And with a new coach like Schottenheimer coming in, did he see something that we didn't? Possibly. Or was it playoff performance? Some would say it's a combination of all three, and that's where I would lean. But I let the facts speak, not my opinion. And we're going to get as close to the answers as we can get in this video from the outside looking in approach, just using deductive reasoning and the things that we can observe. Is Jerry Jones repeating the Herschel Walker blueprint, or is he gambling in panic? Only time will tell. In order to answer these questions, we got to go all the way back to Penn State, okay, where Micah Parsons made his name in several different directions, okay, both from a teammate standpoint, from a talent standpoint. You're going to get a lot of answers in regards to the things, and it's crazy how patterns show up. I'm very good at pattern recognition, right? And the pattern that I saw with the questions and the concerns around Micah Parsons during this trade took me straight back to Penn State, and I'll tell you why. When you start off with some of the conversations between him and Malik Hooker on Twitter, him and DeMarcus Lawrence, both while DeMarcus Lawrence was here and during his exit, talk to you about what type of locker room presence Micah Parsons has. Now, you see players that will speak up for him, like Trayvon Diggs, and say, hey, Micah Parsons was great in the locker room. And me personally, I met the man here in Philadelphia, jumped out of a car. I saw him in traffic walking down the street. I jumped out of the car, and I'm licensed to carry. So he was probably like, what the hell? And this is Philadelphia. But he's like, what the hell? But he was a good sport about it. I jumped out of the car, run up to him, take a picture. And, he took the picture with me. Didn't look too pleased about it because of what I did. But I can't say that the man rubbed me the wrong way in the brief moment that I met him. So there's people who will speak to his character on both sides. But I'll just let the facts be what they are, right? But when you're looking at pattern recognition, when you're talking about his locker room presence, it takes you to the Penn State hazing scandal. There's allegations of a lot of pause-worthy material, you know what I mean? No Diddy, that involves Micah Parsons' name. There's lawsuits. Parsons has denied a lot of involvement, but there are quotes like, I'm going to make you, that stuck to his name, okay? He can't deny that, right? But he would like to put that in the past. And as I said, I don't bring these things up to try to cast aspersions, but to make comparisons to what's being said then and what's being said now, okay? The COVID year. There's no holdout in college football, but the closest thing that we had to that, basically preserving your value so that you don't lose stock in the future, which is what a holdout does, is his COVID opt-out year. Was it about health or was it about draft stock preservation? And both I understand. When the world ends and the world stops immediately and nobody can go anywhere and they're talking like, if you breathe, you could die. I can understand you not wanting to play football that season. So I don't blame you if it was about health. But you can't deny that he was coming off of one of the best performances that any linebacker has ever put up. A performance so good that he still went top 12 in the draft after sitting out a year. That's how good Micah Parsons was at middle linebacker, okay? Haven't seen a linebacker that can do the things that he does, whether it be blitzing, coverage, just wreaking havoc as a defensive end and a rotational player at defensive end as well, run stopping. There's nothing that Micah Parsons can't do on a football field, especially from middle linebacker. You see him covering wide receivers, tight ends, taking on blocks, going around blocks, beating guys in space, beating guys in a phone booth. He can do it all. So generational talent is not a word that is wasted on Micah Parsons. I can guarantee you that. But if he were to have gotten hurt or lackluster performance during an stable season like a COVID season, you can see how that could hurt his draft stock. And it could take a guy that's going top 10, top 12 to maybe the second or third round, which I don't think would happen. But you never know. Injuries have done things like that to Jalen Smith and a bunch of other players. Sean Lee, those guys were first round touted players, Sean Lee being another Penn State product. But they ended up in the second round due to injury. So I can understand you want to sit out after a performance like Micah Parsons put up. When you look at the NFL draft, teams question his maturity right off the bat. But the Cowboys gambled on that talent. They didn't care. And I can understand that because when I watched Micah Parsons, I didn't even know who he was. I was calling him Mika. But someone told me to watch him. And he was the only person that I broke down that season. But I think I broke down him and Patrick Surtain. That's it. And we ended up getting Micah Parsons, 12. And most of the Cowboys fans won't tell you now because they act like he's, they are in love. But most Cowboys fans and content creators did not like the pick at all. They didn't think he was good at all. Or not at all, but they didn't think he was good. Or they didn't think it was a good pick for us. And a lot of them didn't think he could play defensive end either. I've been quoted saying that. But the way we use Micah Parsons here, we can get into later, right? But the way they used him initially, let's talk about, okay? His early NFL dominance. He was the defensive rookie of the year because DeMarcus Lawrence got hurt early and we needed help at defensive end. So Dan Quinn rolled the dice and put him in there. And the rest is history. We're talking about Pro Bowls, generational pass rusher talk, the next Lawrence Taylor talk. There's a lot that was said about Micah Parsons. But let's ask the real question. Do early red flags get erased by production? Or do they resurface once leadership questions appear? Especially if you're the front office that's saying, hey, it's a difference between paying a guy Pro Bowl money, which is, you can go down the list of Pro Bowl talented linebackers or defensive ends and say, okay, these guys get paid, more along the lines of what DeMarcus Lawrence got when he was here. Those types of things, right? TJ Watt, those types of deals. And then there's another question. When you pay that money, you're expecting leadership from those players, right? But when you're paying generational talent type money, and when we've seen players wanting to be paid like that, not paid as their position would dictate, but paid based off the level of talent as a football player. We've seen Devin Hester. We had to figure out how to pay him. Not us, but the NFL did. You've seen guys like Le'Veon Bell wanting to be paid as a football player, not as a running back, because of his ability to not only block and be patient with runs, but also run routes, things like that. His talent as a receiver. So there's a lot of precedence when it comes to paying a guy like that, because you reset the market once you pay a guy that type of money. But when you pay a guy that type of money, you must get productivity and wins. That has to be apparent for two reasons. Not only for the player, because if the player wins, he has leverage. You can say, hey, I can hold these playoff performances and these Super Bowls over your head and say, hey, Jerry, you have to give me my money because you won't make it very far without me. Micah Parsons did not have that leverage because the Cowboys not only were coming off of a season where they didn't even make the playoffs, but the seasons prior when they did, they were coming off performances where Micah Parsons just hadn't done much at all. I mean, as if he's not there, right? So those two things don't add up, right? The leverage is not there if you're not winning. But let's talk about production versus the playoff wins or lack thereof. So there's playoff production and there's regular season productivity, right? Let's use the Packers as a case study because Micah Parsons happens to be on the Packers, and I guess that would be a good parallel to start from, right? In the regular season, Micah Parsons equals elite sack pressure machine, chasing your quarterback down, killing him. Nobody can stop him. From the edge, if you don't chip him, you don't double him, you don't triple him, you don't pay attention to him, he definitely will destroy your game, especially if you plan on passing, and this is a passing league, let's face it. However, when he does those things, he does on the field make everyone else better. So when we talk about leadership, there's something to be spoken to there as well. The Cowboys do usually lead the league in pressures and sacks. During Micah Parsons' tenure, the Cowboys were up there, right? So he did make players better around him on the field, that's for sure, okay? But in the playoffs, the production dipped. There were flashes, and we've heard a lot of content creators talk about the fact that certain players, you just don't even notice that they're on the field. Like, did they even play? We hear that when we're talking about players we don't like. But you don't want to hear that when you're talking about a player that's called or being touted as a generational talent. You don't want to hear that in multiple playoff performances. Okay. We've heard people talk about, like Stephen A. Smith, talk about Dak Prescott's playoff performances and the fact that he hasn't, done well in the playoffs, and they show his playoff record and so on. But that doesn't solely extend to the quarterback only. You have to talk about the leader of your defense as well. And if you are that in Micah Parsons, we should have productivity from you. And it would make more sense if the productivity was there on defense. Then the conversations about Dak and the other players would make more sense. If Parsons is there and he's, killing it, and then we're losing because of the offense or we're losing because of someone else, then those conversations have more merit. But when you're losing due to a lack of productivity from your star player on defense, that's a problem, especially when you look at the 2022 divisional round versus the Packers. The Packers ran right at Micah Parsons, neutralizing him. They knew exactly how to take him out of the game. And both him and DeMarcus Lawrence had a back and forth in regards to getting tired and gassed in the playoff, because I think D-Law spoke on being tired and Parsons commented. And that's where you see the maturity conversation that was talked about in the draft start to resurface, because there's a lot of conversation about Parsons in regards to the way he interfaced with some of the other leaders on this team, right? And you can see it spill over into the media quite a bit. And you can't tell me that that's healthy for any team that's trying to go far in the playoffs. When Micah wasn't disruptive, Dallas looked average. Okay. Presence alters protections, yes. It forces mistakes, of course. But he can be neutralized or absent in certain games, especially our biggest games. Dallas defense softens, the run game starts to gash us. In games where we were tied, and I think Jerry Jones actually spoke to this, but in games where you're either close, tied, or you're down, where teams are going to run the ball on you, the Dallas Cowboys had a handicap. And that handicap was taking one of the most talented linebackers that this game has seen thus far and relegating him solely to defensive end, funneling traffic to other players who may not have Micah Parsons' pedigree at middle linebacker. We've seen this. We've had a year where the Cowboys didn't have a linebacker on the team, so they used guys like Marquise Bell to play linebacker. We've seen Keanu Neal come here and play linebacker as well. Now you can blame that on Dan Quinn for sure, but you can say that the most talented linebacker that the Cowboys had for over the last 4 years has been moonlighting as a defensive end. Now, when you start talking about money and you're talking about generational talent, you have to ask yourself a real question, and this is not shade, this is the truth. Is Micah Parsons the best defensive end in the game today? And when you say best, I don't mean best pass rusher. I mean overall defensive end. Is he the best defensive end in the game today? The answer is no, he's not. He's not. He's probably one of the best pass rushers in the game today. A top 3, you can argue, But the other 2 guys do something that he doesn't, which is they can flat out stop the run. Garrett can stop the run. TJ Watt can stop the run if you run to the outside. Pittsburgh runs a scheme where TJ doesn't have to do as much versus the run, but still, they stop the run. Those teams can stop the run, okay? Now, they don't go anywhere in the playoffs either. So that also leads to the question of, do elite pass rushers equate to Super Bowl wins? Well, let's ask the Eagles. Let's ask the Kansas City Chiefs. Who is their elite pass rusher? They have 2 elite defensive tackles in the interior to do what? Create A-gap pressure and stop the run along the way. both Jalen Carter and Chris Jones. But they do not have an elite pass rusher on either of those teams. So that answer was an easy no. It doesn't equate to Super Bowls solely, right? But stopping the run is definitely the most important part of the playoffs because when it gets cold, you're not throwing the ball. And when you can stop the run, you can make teams one-dimensional, which allows Micah Parsons to do what Micah Parsons does best, which is pass rush, right? Now, when I say he's not the best defensive end in the game, it's not because I don't think he's the best defensive player in the game, because I do think that. And I think the film and the stats have shown that. Micah Parsons is not the best defensive end in the game, but no defensive end in the game that is better than him can play middle linebacker or play all over the field. Micah Parsons is not the best middle linebacker in the game. I think Fred Warner would probably argue with him on that, right? But Fred Warner can't get you 10 sacks a season going forward and stop the run flat out and cover wide receivers up the field. These are things that we've watched Micah Parsons do as a middle linebacker. So in order to get generational talent money, we should have full access to your arsenal of talent. Okay? Now, if we're going to limit that to solely defensive end, I have to agree with the Dallas Cowboys. I have to. Okay? Now, when you look at the divisional round versus the Packers, as I said, they ran right at him, neutralizing him. He wasn't disruptive in the opener. We talked about that, right? And is he elite in January, right? That's the question. Or is it just October through December? Do the Packers now hold a piece that the Dallas Cowboys couldn't maximize? Maybe. The Packers may need just a pass rusher to get to the next level, right? Him and Rashawn Gary are going to do great things. Van Ness, those guys over there are great. They have a very good, young, talented defense. But the Cowboys needed to get numbers as well. And could they do that while keeping Micah Parsons? I don't think they could. So the pick is the trade is not just good for the Packers, but also good for the Dallas Cowboys at this point. And they say the key to good business or doing good business is being a good middleman, meaning making sure all parties are happy with the deal. So the Packers, there's no reason that the Packers couldn't have won this trade and the Dallas Cowboys as well. I think the Packers have won. This season, they will do better due to Micah Parsons being there, I assume, because he's my favorite player. And I do think that Micah Parsons will add elements to that defense that are much needed. But his absence also allows the Cowboys to change culturally and to add elements and players to the game that is much needed or are much needed as well. Entering Kenny Clark, who we all know his impact on the game thus far. But when you look at a guy like a Kenny Clark who can control the interior and shore up a defensive tackle room that was in question coming into the season, you don't say, hey, Kenny Clark for Micah Parsons is even traded. By no means. He's not. But you can say his approach to the game and his ability to kind of set the tone and calm down the culture and school those guys, along with Solomon Thomas, who's here as well. But those guys are now going to be rallying around leadership, okay? And I don't think they were feeling that way when Micah Parsons was here. Although I don't want to speak for a player specifically, I just look at the tone and the way their morale looked in some of their big games. They didn't have anybody to look to or lean on, and no one stepped up. So there was definitely something left wanting if you're Jerry Jones and you're asking, do I pay Micah Parsons? Now let's look at the locker room dynamics for a bit. Micah Parsons has had visible sideline clashes with DeMarcus Lawrence. I think they even fought. Someone said that they fought. I don't know, but I've definitely seen them cursing each other out at the on the sideline in the Baltimore game. We all know about the Malik Hooker comments that talked about his podcast, and the podcast being a sore spot for some of the guys in the locker room. And and this is a new thing with this young generation, right? The new generation, not the podcasting, but the word hater. Criticism has now morphed into hate because a lot of people do hate, right? Now, if you're looking at it from I want what you have, I don't like you having it some of the players may have felt that way, you don't deserve it, whatever, then you could call that hate, right? But when you're saying, hey, I don't mind you, having a podcast. I just want you to put the team and stopping the run first. That's what Malik Hooker stated when asked about Micah Parsons' podcast. Now, you've seen that podcast lead to issues that I myself cringed over. And I liked the podcast. But I myself looked at the podcast as a sore spot, and here's why. Micah Parsons was asked to rank his top quarterbacks in the league. And he ranked them, maybe honestly, in his opinion. But he didn't even put Dak on it, which created even more questions for Dak, right? Which we already know how much Dak deals with the media and how much the media loves Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. But to add added pressure to your own quarterback during a season, answering questions that aren't even being asked to you, you can understand why some people would say that it's a distraction. People don't understand the word distraction. If I have to answer a question about a thing that I normally wouldn't have to speak on, by default, it's a distraction. Okay? So if you have to ask if something is a distraction, the fact that we're asking if it's a distraction means it's distracting us from something else that we could be asking. It's automatically a distraction, whether you like it or not. So the podcast was a distraction to that locker room. And to Hooker's point, can you afford to have distractions when one season you're not making the playoffs, in other seasons you're getting ousted out of the playoffs, literally by way of running at the person who is doing the distracting? That has to be asked, and that question has been answered. And the answer is yes, it's a distraction. And none of the players, I don't think, enjoyed that very much. When you look at that DeMarcus Lawrence's exit, okay, not only the playoff conversation where they talked about, hey, you got tired, and him and Micah Parsons had a back and forth there, but then there's a sideline conversation where they had that back and forth there. And then you have his exit where he says, I can't win with the Dallas Cowboys. I can't win there. That's what DeMarcus Lawrence said when he went to Seattle, who I don't know if they're going to win anything either. But he went there saying that about the Cowboys. Now, why would he do that? Now, we thought that was a conversation aimed at Jerry Jones. That's what I thought. Until he went on the Pivot podcast, DeMarcus Lawrence, that is, and stated that, hey, I don't got a problem with Jerry. Jerry paid me. So it wasn't about Jerry. That comment, due to deductive reasoning, was aimed at Micah Parsons directly. Okay? So for him to say that shows that there was something going on in the locker room that made players look at Micah Parsons differently. And he's a polarizing figure, but they definitely didn't like some of the things that were going on. Whether they admit that or not publicly, that's not for them to do. But I will, right? Now you have passion versus immaturity. Which one is it? And when you look at some of the things that we saw during the holdout, it points to immaturity. When you want your money, you're trying to get paid, but you're distracting the team that's trying to prepare for a season with a new head coach. Do you think that that coach needs this distraction? Now, you can ask that question to Jerry. You can ask that question to Micah Parsons because both of them had a hand to play in the distraction. Jerry is going to distract you anyway. Can't get around that hill, and don't die on that hill if you're Brian Schottenheimer. But Micah Parsons is not Jerry Jones. And when you're asked about Micah Parsons, the conversations you've had or didn't have with Micah Parsons, when you're at, these things are very distracting. When we look at the offseason and say, hey, I don't even know which one of these young players I should be paying attention to, because all we're talking about is if Micah Parsons is going to get paid or not. And then while all that is happening, you're laying on the sideline, kind of loafing and so on, right? And I've never seen an interview except for Drew Rosenhaus. I've never seen an interview with an agent before. I think I had to go all the way back to Real Sports to see Drew, and that was during the TO era. So agents generally don't interface with the media. So for David Mulugeta to have to get up and speak for Micah Parsons, I think with Stephen A. Smith and other guys, it shows the type of circus or shit show it was during the offseason. And you can't tell me that's not distracting to these young players who are trying to not only make their spot and make their name in a league where they worked all their life to get here, but also under a new head coach and a new defensive coordinator, new everything, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach. Just there's a new staff that you have to acclimate to, and while trying to do that, there's a circus going on outside. No one would sign up for that. So you can't speak that itself wasn't a divide in the locker room, because it was. Did Micah's fire elevate the locker room, or did it divide it? You have to ask that question. If you say it elevated the locker room, give me the examples that show at certain points you see these guys rallying around the things that Micah Parsons is doing, and they're playing better because of it. No, that's not elevation of locker room. You do see them playing better and getting more sacks because he's getting pressures chasing quarterbacks into them. Yeah, he does that. He does that. But the example just wasn't there, I don't think, based off of the things that we can find out here. But let's look at it, okay? Let's keep talking, because also there was a statement stated, or there were statements made that says, hey, Micah Parsons wanted to be a Cowboy for life. Now, if you're requesting a trade, the team didn't tell you they wanted to trade you. You request a trade and state that you would rather play somewhere else. You don't want to be here anymore. I mean, that kind of contradicts that statement. Okay, and if you're the one in charge, if you're Micah Parsons, and you want to be here, then that means that your agent may have leaned you or gleaned you away from being here. So that means you're not in charge. Is that the case? I don't think so. So if you are in charge, but you want to be here, then you would be here, because there would be a conversation where you state to your agent, by no means do I want to go anywhere else at all, right? So there's conversations that could have been had. And I mean, maybe I'm being a fan with that part of the conversation. I won't lie. But there were conversations being had that don't quite add up to him wanting to solely play for the Dallas Cowboys, which is his right. But remember that pattern recognition conversation we had before? You have a player who held out in college because it was what was best for himself in his career. And you have a player who requested a trade and was traded and held out because it was what was best for him and himself and his family and his career, which I don't hate on. But let's talk about that honestly and not stop making it seem like, he wanted to stay here. I don't think the facts point to that. I don't. Money was definitely talking to Micah Parsons. It's Parsons versus QBs, right? He's being paid more than, quite a few quarterbacks in the league today, right? But he's up there in the conversation as far as pay with some of the top. Like, you got Dak Prescott, who makes $60 million a year. You got Burrow, Josh Allen, Love, they make about 55. You got Tua and Purdy, about 53 a year. Well, Parsons is at 47 a year. He's in the conversation with the top quarterbacks in the league. Now, we always have this conversation, which is great that we've set a precedence with the quarterbacks, right? Because we always have the conversation when we're talking about quarterbacks as to, well, does that translate into playoff wins, into Super Bowls? Well, when you talk about Burrow's been to one. Josh Allen's been to championship games. Jordan Love has been to those. He's won playoff games. Dak Prescott, not so much. Tua, no. Purdy's been there. Okay, so when you have quarterbacks that have shown you, hey, I can lead a team to the promised land, or at least get close to it, you have to pay those guys because they are the guy that touches the ball every play. Okay, you're gonna have to pay them. But when you have a defensive end or a linebacker moonlighting as a defensive end who's playing out of position, who at times where you could say, hey, we need a linebacker on this team, could have stepped up and played and done what we would consider to be generational, amazing stuff. Like, hey, we're going to move this guy around like a chess piece and let him wreak havoc everywhere, right? When he elects to still pass rush when asked to do those things, that tells you he's after money. Why I say that is because a defensive end gets paid. A pass rusher will get paid more than a linebacker in this league. Now, Micah Parsons, we can argue a lot of things, but we cannot argue that Micah Parsons' best game was played at defensive end. I don't think it was. I think Micah Parsons' best game that he's ever played, in my opinion, or one of the best games that I've seen him play, is the Vikings game in his rookie year, where he literally wreaked Vikings game in his rookie year, where he literally wreaked havoc all over the field. We've seen him make plays and force interceptions where he's covering guys all the way up the field that he probably shouldn't be covering, right? Now, we saw some mistakes in that as well. But when you look at Micah Parsons as as a linebacker, he had a year that he set out, and then he had 3 years, direct years in the beginning of his career where he wasn't being coached as a linebacker at all. He was a defensive end. So, of course, him playing his natural position at this point probably doesn't make much sense because his mind is geared towards being a defensive end. We've criticized Jesse Holley for stating that, hey, he's relying on athleticism, but he can be so much better if he embraced his true position. And that turned into a hate fest where they thought that Holley was hating. But I actually agree with some of the sentiment that Holley was trying to lay down. I understood that. But this isn't a conversation about Micah Parsons playing linebacker. This video is about Micah Parsons' effect on the team. However, him playing linebacker definitely affects the team in different situations, especially those playoff games where he wants to go against the best of the best. So he'll go against Trent Williams. He'll go against Lane Johnson. We just saw in the Detroit game, he went against their best right tackle, right? He wants to do those things. He says, hey, this is a rivalry now, right? The reason he's doing these things, though, is it because you want to win, or is it because you want the glory that comes with defeating the opposition, the likes of which are almost insurmountable, right? Who does that serve? When you have a receiver that can beat, when we have a quarterback that sees a receiver that can beat, let's say, your backup corner, do we say, hey, line up on Dion, line up on Sham Bailey, or do we try to create mismatches where we can get our good guys on a lame duck, right? Those are the things that you do to create wins and create a new element. You don't say, hey, let's keep running into this brick wall and hope that it works. That's what Micah Parsons has done, but the coaches have let him do it, so there's enough blame to go around when it comes to that, right? But let's just talk about it, though. Micah Parsons left the Dallas Cowboys for money. Micah Parsons wanted to go to the Packers. They spoke on this, him and Jordan Love, in, I think, the Pro Bowl conversation I think they had on. I'll put the clips up. But they spoke on it, and you see a little flirtation going on, pause, when it comes to him playing for the Packers. So Micah Parsons being a Packer, it doesn't surprise me. What surprised me is the lack of understanding from a fan's perspective as it pertains to the value of him going to the Packers. But let's talk about that. The Herschel Walker parallel and the win-win for the Cowboys, right? We got to go all the way back to the 80s to talk about Herschel Walker, that trade that created the Dallas Cowboys dynasty, right? Star for picks, 1 star for several picks, and that's a dynasty core that was built through a draft, right? Now, anyone who's just watched the Netflix documentary, you can watch how they documented that trade if you like to. So I don't need to get into details there, but Jerry is repeating that same structure. The same structure that got him here in the first place, the same structure that made us love the Dallas Cowboys, that gambler oil mindset where, hey, I'm going to keep striking at it. I don't care what people say about me. I don't care how much is piling up against me. All I got to do is hit big by basically taking one win and making it count. He won in the oil game, hit for $100 million and went and bought the Dallas Cowboys with that money. That's the first thing he did. He risked. He won off of a risk and then went and risked it all again to own and manage a team that admittedly he had no clue as to how to run. So he's repeating his old patterns as well. Let's key in on pattern recognition. Okay, he took one guy and through the draft by trading Herschel Walker, created a team that made me myself love the Dallas Cowboys. The reason you know who I am is because of the things Jerry Jones did in the 90s. That's why I'm here. I would probably be an Eagles fan otherwise, because I was from Texas, but I was raised in Philadelphia. But I loved the Dallas Cowboys ever since I could remember, because I wanted to be Emmitt Smith when I was a kid, right? So when you look at the things that Jerry Jones was able to accomplish, and you see the move that he's making right now, you can't help but to be curious enough to sit back and say, hey, let me just hold my judgment for a little while just to see what Jerry Jones is doing, because I've seen him do this before, right? And even during that time, if you look at some of the sound clips of some of the fans, they hated him then, and we hate him now, right? A lot of people do. But Jerry does not give a damn. That's the thing that makes him great. He doesn't care what you think. He just wants to get paid, number one. And number two, he wants to win. And I think this move shows that he wants to see another Super Bowl before he leaves this earth. Because he might not have another 30 years in him. Who knows, right? You never know. Cowboys secure picks and flexibility for the Micah Parsons trade. You not only got Kenny Clark, that's one Pro Bowler. You signed Bland, that's two. They went out after that and they signed Hunter Lipke, who we like. You know what I mean? They just started extending players. So you start to see, hey, they're starting to spread the wealth around due to the fact that we don't have to worry about preserving money to pay Micah Parsons. And on the Packers side of it, Parsons fills an immediate void on their defense. He elevates their ceiling right now. A team that's already good right now. Now, they had Wyatt, who was trained under Kenny Clark, who they drafted to be Kenny Clark's replacement. So Kenny Clark wasn't necessarily needed, right? So you get rid of a guy you don't necessarily need, that the Cowboys definitely need, because that locker room needs tutelage. Guys like Mozzie Smith, who we've been talking about all offseason, Jay Toya. We got a lot of young guys over there. Winfrey, who just got hurt. But we got guys over there who can learn from a guy like Kenny Clark, right? So both of the teams involved in this trade benefited. On the Cowboys side, they got draft capital, payroll control, possibly their next dynasty foundation is built with this. And the trade can be great for both the Packers and the Cowboys. The Packers gain today, the Cowboys gain tomorrow. Does it mirror 1989? Could both teams walk away winners? I think so. Productivity versus disruption. The Cowboys lost their defensive centerpiece, but cleared up cap for Dak, CD, and a rebuild. The Packers got their Lawrence Taylor type, if he shows up in the playoffs, of course. Parsons now has no excuses. He has a new contract, new team. And the Cowboys have no excuses. Must convert this return into real pieces. They have to do it. Otherwise, they're going to be the laughingstock of the league. Will Parsons be the piece that Green Bay needed to win the NFC? Or will Dallas look back like 89 and say, that trade changed everything? In closing, Micah Parsons' story is about accumulation. Hazing scandals, COVID opt-outs, early dominance, playoff questions, sideline antics, and now blockbuster trade and a record contract. That's his story. That's his accumulation of knowledge over his years of experience. The Cowboys once flipped Herschel Walker and built a dynasty. The Packers now have Parsons as their cornerstone. The twist? This could be one of those rare trades where both sides win. The only question left is, which one wins bigger? Let's find out this season and beyond. But regardless of what happens, thank you for watching Micah Parsons Akoye. Stay tuned. There's going to be more.